Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, has recently visited Australia to, as sort of the aftermath of the Bondi Beach terrorist attack, to talk to the Jewish communities in Australia and to, try to calm down the situation, which of course led to pro-Hamas protests against calling for his arrest, calling him a war criminal, and all of that. Now, some people might be saying Israel has a president? Yes, as with many parliamentary republics, they oftentimes have the representative executive function, but as with parliamentary republics is a custom, the president doesn't really have any executive functions. He has usually no even really oversight of the government, no influence over the executive functions of government, no influence. I mean some, and depending on which parliamentary republics we are talking about, you could mention it. But yeah, generally there isn't much yet. He is part of the Israeli state, and Israeli state is uniquely evil, according to these protesters, uh, and needs to be protested against, according to them. So we'll talk about that today. And later on in the show, I'll bring up, I think yesterday and even a few days ago, we talked about the idea of anti-Zionism. It was brought up because we were talking about Anna Kasparian and Michael Rechtenwald. So the idea of anti-Zionism was brought up. And I think it connects to this topic pretty nicely. So we'll talk a little bit about anti-Zionism. I'm wondering what people in the chat think, because hopefully I think a whole episode should be made probably about anti-Zionism, or maybe an article on Substack. I was thinking about that as well. So I think it would be nice to have a discussion in the later part of the show. But let's get to this. So welcome to the Daily Objective. My name is Daniel, and joining me today is James Valiant. So yeah, let's get to this. So going back, we had the Bondi terrorist attack, 15 deaths, plus the attacker also died. On top of that, one of the attackers, because it was two of them, father and son, dozens of injuries. And when it comes to what people are protesting, it's the Israeli president being in Australia. Again, when it comes to Australian protesters, none of them were, or at least in the recent memory, I don't remember any of them being for Israel. All of them are anti-Israeli. Um, which again, it should be said, Israel is not doing anything wrong. In the large context of things, focusing on any wrong or any bad things Israel might have done is inappropriate. Not because there was a Holocaust, or not because there was October 7 and therefore everything else is excused, but because Israel is not doing anything wrong. Israel is defending itself in Gaza. It's fighting against its enemies, not just in Gaza, against Hezbollah, against the Houthis, against Iran, trying to destroy a legitimate Western state, a bunch of dictatorships, and many of those people in those dictatorships, like Palestinians, are actively supporting the destruction of Israel. And Israel is simply trying to defend itself. Any protest against that, and this is why I think it connects a little bit to anti-Zionism, and any protest against that is calling for more of that. That's why I titled this Bondi Beach wasn't enough for these people. 15 people died. No, not enough. They want more. And they might not, they might evade what it actually means to support Hamas, or even to support Palestinians, because I think it means the same thing. So they might be evading that, but they will not evade the consequences of it. And, another attack might come. Or not even to mention the attack against the state of Israel itself has already been great, and I mean great as in big, not good. But
Yeah.
James, any opening thoughts from you about Israeli president's visit to Australia?
Well, you just pointed out the first thing that needs to be pointed out. Israel is doing nothing wrong. Israel was attacked, has been under attack from all sides in multiple groups. They suffered, repeated missile attacks from Iran. They've suffered attacks from the Houthis in Yemen. They've suffered attacks from Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south. And I mean, from the minute Hamas took over Gaza, more than 20 years ago, they were launching, their rockets into Israel. And it climaxed, Israel's inaction, frankly, climaxed in October 7th, but they were the victims of October 7th, and so they're engaged in an act of valid self-defense. To call it genocide, when of course the people attacking them are explicitly genocidal in their motives and engaged in atrocities against Israelis whenever they can accomplish those atrocities, is just absolutely disgusting and vile. It's not genocide, it's the twisting of language. It's in effect implying all by itself that Israel has no right to defend itself and no right to exist. So the first thing to say is Israel is not only not engaged in genocide, but it is engaged in, frankly, over restraining itself in its valid acts of self-defense. It should be more direct and more ruthless in wiping out their attackers than they have been. The fact that there's still Hamas tells you that right there. So Israel is doing nothing. The claims of genocide reveal everything about the genocidal intentions of those who support and defend these people. It's just the opposite. It's kind of, Orwellian newspeak: freedom is slavery, war is peace, etc., etc. Now, and context matters. Context, context, context. What just happened in Australia was the slaughter of innocent people on a beach near Sydney. And the Israeli head of state, not head of government, as you point out, the head of government is the one who establishes policy. Sometimes they're the same, like in the United States. Our head of state is our head of government. He's not just a symbolic president. He sets the foreign and military policy of the government, and he's also the top official in the government. But this would be more like the King Charles versus the Keir Starmer. The prime minister sets the political policy in Great Britain. The king is pretty much a figurehead, head of state. In Israel, you say it correctly that different parliamentary systems give different levels of power to their presidents. But in this case, it's largely, at least, the symbolic head of state, not the head of government, which is a distinction that is usually made. And in the wake of that slaughter on a beach in Sydney, the president of Israel is visiting. He's visiting to give reassurance to the Jewish community in Australia, indicate, that there's a problem to the Australian government that they need to address about anti-Semitism and, that terrorism. And he gets protested for that visit in this context. So context really matters too. So what they're saying is, how dare you, Israel, even come here or exist? How dare you complain or try and reassure Jewish people in Australia? How dare you? I mean, that is vile anti-Semitism to protest them in this context, in my view. I mean, obviously, it would be even if there hadn't been the slaughter on the beach, it would be horrible what they're saying, wrong what they're saying. Israel is simply defending itself. But in the context of the slaughter that occurred recently in Australia, it should be shocking and disgusting to everyone around. You're telling me that the symbolic head of state merely visiting your country is objectionable to you in the context of that slaughter. It is breathtakingly evil, is all I can think. These people are dropping context. Not a peep from them. Not a, context matters. What's going on in Iran recently is unknown thousands, tens of thousands of Iranians are being slaughtered by their own government, disappeared by their own government, and they're being shut off from communicating to the outside world. The ordinary people in Iran are being shut off from their communications to the outside world to even tell the world what's really going on, so we can really know the extent of this horrific slaughter by a totalitarian government. And do they raise a peep about it? Do they complain a moment about it? There are all kinds of horrible things that go on in the world, really horrible things that go on in the world. But all of their focus is directed against Israel, which suffered an attack and is defending itself. That tells you everything you need to know about where these people's heads, not their heads, because their heads are obviously not functioning properly in evaluating, putting things in moral context and the correct hierarchy of what is, a value about human life. I mean, what did the Iranian people do, for example? Okay, they're just being slaughtered on the streets. Okay, that's not worthy of complaint. What's worthy of complaint is Israel defending itself at all. That is, as you point out, it's more like the king of the United Kingdom coming and visiting. So what you would be complaining about is the existence of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Okay, it's not Keir Starmer that you're going out and protesting. It would be King Charles that you're going out and protesting. Okay, that is an interesting point you make right there. Okay, we object to the existence of Great Britain is what in effect you'd be saying if you were just coming to visit. Let's say British people were slaughtered someplace and the king came to visit and you protested it. What would be the clear message? You shouldn't exist at all. Anti-Zionism is code these days. It's they realize that if they were to really just say there ought not to be any Israeli state and Jews don't have a right to exist, that would be, outright anti-Semitism. So what they do is they invent a new code to kind of sidestep the obvious bigotry in their position with this code, anti-Zionism. But look, when you look at the slaughter on the beach in Australia, that is just the latest episode telling you why there ought to be a state of Israel. There ought to be a place where Jews are safe. Jews especially. See, the more they do this, the more you see attacks like the slaughter on the beach in Australia, the more it underlines in my mind the necessity for a Jewish state, a state where Jewish people can be safe, because they're not safe in Europe. They're not safe in America. They're not safe in Australia. When you think to yourself, well, if there's a safe place in the world for them to be, it ought to be the United States. But no, you can step outside of an Israeli event in Washington, D.C. and get gunned down. I can go through the whole list of anti-Semitic attacks that recently have occurred in Europe. Then, of course, there's the slaughter recently in Australia. Those events simply underscore the necessity for a place where Jewish people can be safe on this planet. And that place is under unique attack. And that place is distinctly the most civilized country in the entire region. So they're not complaining about Iran. They're not complaining about the attacks on Israel. They're not complaining about even human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, are they? They save their special hatred for the place where women do have rights, where there is freedom of speech, where people can improve their own lives. Israel, compared to all the other countries in the area, it is light years more civilized, and Israel is unique, therefore enemy. Israel must be singled out in all of their, and this is true, I think, in general about anti-Israel. Look at it's not just the left either. Look at on the American right, this anti-Israel, pro-Islamic culture and nation, embodied by people like Tucker Carlson, who, like I say, spoke at the Republican National Convention. He was invited recently to the White House. There are leading figures in the American right, not just the left, which of course we have the Squad and we know their hatred of Israel as such, but it's people on the right and the left in my country who are anti-Israel, and they save their special anger for Israel because Israel dares to try and have a place where Jewish people are not under murderous attack. Because guess what? In the so-called civilized places of the world, like Europe and America and Australia, they are under attack. So it's clearly anti-Semitism. It's clearly motivated by sheer bigotry. And they really have no sense of values, human rights, at all. If they were, they would embrace, look, Arab states in the area should embrace the existence of Israel. trade with Israel could only be a win-win for them. Israel, you know what I mean? So if you're attacking Israel for being, you know their motives, that these Muslim fanatics around Israel, their motives are sheer bigotry. Their motives are the genocidal ones. But that's not what gets the attention. What gets the attention is what Israel tries to defend itself. In my view, that defense has been weak, nothing like what it should be or morally could be. And yet Israel is getting attacked for it. I've never heard of war action in which the one side says get out of the building before they blow up the building, where one side is trying to get food into the enemy population. Never heard of that in the history of warfare. Never heard of that. Israel is taking unprecedented steps, which they really ought not to be taking, to truly defend Israel. But Israel takes unprecedented steps in the history of warfare, and still Israel is guilty of genocide. And still they can't even breathe a word about the totalitarian slaughter happening in Iran today. You think it's a bit out of whack, Daniel? Do you think there's something slightly, when it comes to the functioning or rather non-functioning of these people's brains, the non-functioning of their value system? No, what it tells me about is that their value system is perverse, messed up, anti-life, anti-freedom. They cannot tolerate the existence of Israel. That's sheer anti-Semitic bigotry. I'm not sure what more I have to say other than the fact that this has confessed everything you need to know about these anti-Israel protesters. They're, on the face of it, it's vile anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, again, these protests, they're not protesting, because even when you take it, the idea that President of Israel is going to Australia to tell the Australian government, hey guys, you should probably protect the rights of your citizens. I mean, not like I don't want to tell you what to do, but like maybe you should like defend the rights of your citizens, because I understand that, he's coming there specifically for the Jewish community, since as a Jewish state there is some connection. But President Herzog has no obligation towards Australian citizens. Like when we are talking, I mean, I don't know. I don't know like every single person who was murdered at the beach or who was injured. So I don't know if some of them maybe held also Israeli citizenship. But they were residents of Australia. They were most likely citizens of Australia. It's for Australian government to deal with that, right? And when it comes to these protests, they are not protesting that the government itself isn't properly defending the rights of their citizens. I mean, bad things happen. You cannot avoid bad things happening. But having a terrorist attack and walking away, like imagine if 9/11 happened, or any terrorist attack anywhere that happened in Europe, or anywhere for that matter around the world, right? The fact that the idea is to walk away with like, well, I think we didn't change anything, but I think that's good. So
What
yeah,
should they be
and that is what
protesting?
is disgusting.
What the hell should they be protesting? The inadequacy of the Australian government to protect its own people, which you rightly point out, that's the responsibility of the Australian government. The Australian government clearly has failed to protect a portion of their population. So what should they be protesting? Protesting the arrival of the Israeli president to come who's coming there to reassure the Jewish population? Well, what the hell should they be protesting? The Israeli president or their own government for failing to protect their own population? It is the point you make there is devastating. It's mind-blowing. I mean, think about the inverted values. Think about the life hatred, liberty hatred, bigotry, the collectivist tribalism that must underlie this. It puts it in italics with 3 exclamation points afterwards. I mean, if that's not obvious. But it's really hard for people who approach the whole subject like that to see reality at all. Their own bigoted values, their own twisted way of it's all self-justification anyway, will make it practically impossible for them to see the truth. There's no arguing with those protesters. Those protesters have divorced themselves from reality and reason to such a degree that there's really no communicating with them, right? The Australian government ought to, of course, protect their Jewish population, knowing that there's these irrational bigots who are walking the streets of their country. The president, the leadership of Israel, of Australia, ought to be out there every day saying it is very disturbing. Not, I believe in free speech, but they should say, because of this kind of vile hatred against the Jews, which is apparently widespread phenomenon in this country, we obviously need to take steps to protect our Jewish population, which we have failed to do in the past. I mean, that's what ought to be coming from the leadership in Australia. What can you say?
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thanks so much. There is a conversation in the chat talking about, I think it started with saying that we are entitled to tell people who should they condemn or not, or that you shouldn't tell people who they should condemn or not. Which I think I mean, to some extent I would agree. Like, I don't think it's like, yeah, people should think for themselves. I mean, I think what is right for me, but I'm going to criticize, like, if I'm going to criticize the condemnation or not condemnation or participation in certain protests. I mean, if you join a protest for AKP, the Association for Kicking Puppies, maybe I'm not expecting you to condemn it, but I'm not gonna, like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about the people involved in that, and say, okay, this is like disgusting. And that's the same when it comes to pro-Palestinian protests. I think people who join them are disgusting, are anti-Western, are against the ideas that are upholding the Western civilization. And I'm not gonna be like, I mean, it's weird to say somebody should, like, condemn something, or somebody should protest something, or nothing. But when you take action, when you actually do something, yeah, we are going to talk about that action. Like the point of going into protest is to implicit reaction, right? Like, you're not going there just to, like, feel good about yourself. When you go out and you protest in front of a parliamentary building or in front of Israeli embassy or something, you're trying to implicit, like, I assume they have a goal they want to achieve, right? Like, they are not, like, they want to achieve something when they go out and protest. It's not just for fun. I mean, if people are doing it just for fun, then they should stop. Like, the point of protest should be to achieve some goal, be it political goal, be it change in the policy of the government, be it replacing of the government, or changing the relationship of their own government to another government. So I'm gonna criticize that, like any political or societal or cultural policy. It's either right or it's wrong. If we are talking about specifically like this, like, maybe there are, like, specific protests, but it's like purely personal, association for wearing red shirts, like, that's a personal thing. Maybe I won't have, like, an opinion on that, but in most protests it's very objective that it's either right or it's wrong.
Well, I don't know. Have you seen some red shirts? But leaving that aside, it's really humorous when anyone asserts an opinion. When someone says, "How dare you tell me what to think?" Look, Daniel, I didn't recall you and I going out and pointing guns at anyone, using force against anyone, even advocating for censorship of what should and shouldn't be allowed to be said, spoken, etc. No, but it's really funny when you express any opinion. If someone says in response, "How dare you tell me what to think?" Well, look, if I say 1 + 1 = 2, am I telling you what to think, forcing you what to believe? No, I'm asserting my view that, you got one thing, then you got one other thing, you've got two things, okay?
No, because
Anytime.
again, it's not how dare you tell me what you think, right? Because if I say something, I say a statement, and somebody says, "How dare you tell me? How dare you tell me what to think?" That's a weird reaction to have.
It
I
is
didn't implicit anything,
fundamentally
because what
bizarre.
they're what they're fundamentally calling for is, let me live in my delusion. No, 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 no. Because that is what
Exactly.
it is. It's
That's the
don't.
motive.
It's let me. Yeah, it is. Let me live in
No,
my.
they don't have to object to what's going on in Iran. They don't have to object to tens of thousands of civilians being slaughtered by their own government. Okay? They don't have to object to the totalitarian ways of Iran. No, 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 no. You can go on and ignore that and put your values somewhere else. and think that there's something, more important for you to do, complain about, parking tickets in, some car park in London. If you think that's more important, you've confessed a lot about your hierarchy of values to me. Okay, I get to have an opinion too. And guess what? I will never articulate an opinion I don't think is true. And guess what? Caring more about what's going on in Iran than, say, parking ticket policy at some car park in London is on a different scale. Okay. Similarly here, but it's even worse. Israel is actually trying to defend itself from people who have explicitly said we want to wipe it out, and they're under attack from multiple groups on all sides. Okay, so what you're saying is you're confessing your values in asserting an opinion, but everyone can assert their opinion, however absurd. That's what freedom of speech means. But some opinions are absurd. Some opinions are downright evil. Okay, I get to have that opinion too. I'm not putting a gun to you. I'm not saying there ought to be any laws requiring you to say that. Okay, what I'm saying is if you think otherwise, I would ask you to check your premises, check your facts, check your hierarchy of values. That's what I'm asking you to do because I think there is an objective one. And I hope that you, when you express your opinion, you also believe that it is reality based and a correct hierarchy of values that is appropriate to life on earth and the facts of reality. Okay? That is, you're absolutely right. With their real psychological motive that's being confessed there is la 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 la. I don't want to hear you saying these things because they make me uncomfortable. Because you're reminding me of the slaughter of Jews on a beach near Sydney. You're reminding me of the horrors that are going on in Iran. You're reminding me of other important facts that I may need to integrate to have a valid reality-based opinion. I don't want to hear all that because I already hate Israel and I don't care if Israel is under attack from Iran, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and everyone else in the world practically, verbally speaking, including the United Nations. Okay, so la 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 la. Please do not. You're telling me what I have to think and what they have to protest. Well, I'm saying that in this context, after the slaughter on the beach in Australia, protesting the arrival of the president of Israel, to talk about that is obviously that's the context of his going there, is getting your values all screwed up and reveals a bigotry, an anti-Semitic bigotry on their part. Okay, if you don't like those facts, it's the facts you have a problem with. If you don't like logic, it's logic you don't have a problem with. If you don't have your values squared away, your hierarchy of values, what's important, squared away, then okay, you're anti-life. Okay, if that's an unpleasant truth for you, if it's uncomfortable to face, then you need to look hard in a mirror. But of course, as I say, it's useless to talk to these people. They're not going to evaluate things on any reality-based, method like reason or a hierarchy of values that puts human life and human liberty, way up there. No. They don't care about life. They don't care about the facts. They don't care about reason. There's no sense talking to them anymore. They are so far gone that you waste your breath in even discussing anything with these people. Now, to those who are reachable, we are trying on these podcasts with Ayn Rand Center UK to reach them with facts based on the value of human life and the fact that reason is our only way of understanding these things, and that we have to attend to all the facts and integrate them if we're going to have a valid opinion. But in effect, you're telling me what my opinion is if I were to do the other way about, right? So you're absolutely right. These people are just confessing their evasion. No one is censoring you. No one's forcing you. There's people who have a different opinion, and let me suggest one that is better attuned to reality, the one that's using reason to integrate all the facts, one that places life at the pinnacle of their standard of value. I don't know what else to say, Daniel.
So somebody brought in that if I were to summarize it, it's something like if we are too condemnatory, those people wouldn't listen. But I would suggest that I think like I'm trying to introspect of when I change my mind or when I'm open. And yeah, it's usually coming from people who are, offering something different. And I think that's what we are trying to do, offering something different. But also when it comes to at some point, like we are not talking about a conversation about should we have a flat tax or should we lower minimum wage or should we abolish minimum wage rather or should we reform the education system. We are talking about the basic ideas of enlightenment if they apply, if Western civilization is the one to achieve, if a legitimate state of Israel should defend itself against terrorists and against population that wants to wipe it out. I like I don't know. I don't know how an honest pro-Palestinian person looks like. I haven't seen such a person. Like I don't know how such a person can exist. I don't know how that looks like. Like I can imagine, like I said, somebody who's who wants government involvement in healthcare. Like I might disagree with it, but I can understand why like somebody would support such a thing or different want a different political system like presidential republic instead of parliamentary republic or vice versa like or want a different amount of people at the Supreme Court in the US, right? Like that's a conversation we can have where there might not even necessarily be like an objectively right like it's much more political. I mean objectively it could be like obviously not 1,000 and obviously not one, but
Well,
some.
there you bring up a really good point. The you know, I think there's an objective answer to all of those questions. I think that there's a right and wrong answer, indeed, to nearly every question that I could think of right now. Okay, there are some things I don't know, but when I have enough, I think there is a right and a wrong answer to questions. However, there comes a point when that wrong answer gets so irrational and becomes so reality detached that it cannot be honest. It cannot be honest. Now, that's at a pretty extreme level, as you point out. I could have a rational debate, discussion on a host of a number of political issues where I could understand someone. And even if they're wrong, of course, obviously, if I think they're wrong, they're probably missing some important fact or facts. They're probably not processing it, integrating it logically in an appropriate way. But I could understand why they might make that mistake. It's an understandable mistake that could come from an honest person who's still reality oriented. When the opinion drops off, if someone, let me put it this way. I think there's a huge difference when Tucker Carlson said previously, I'm sort of a moderate Episcopalian. And okay, that doesn't, and then now he says, no, I should have been much more fundamentalist all along. I was physically attacked by demons. I think what you've done is you've gone from something, I could argue about. Maybe you have a Thomas Aquinas argument for the existence of God and religion and all that. Okay, I'll debate you on that. But when someone says, no, I'm being physically attacked by demons, I'm sorry, I lose interest in the conversation. The man is obviously not reachable by reason. Facts won't change his mind. I'm wasting my breath in having a conversation with that person. And it is a moral issue at that, a clear moral issue at that. Sometimes it might be a moral issue even in the more moderate cases, but I'm not in a position to evaluate them personally and morally. I would have to know someone's context very, very well to judge them in most cases. I would have to know someone very, very well to understand if it was a moral issue of dishonesty or simply an honest error of knowledge, the distinction Ayn Rand makes, make every allowance for, errors of knowledge. But to take the opposite policy when it comes to dishonesty and evasion, breaches of morality. But to know that in any individual case, very often, if not most frequently, requires me to know their context. There are some times when an opinion is so detached from reality, is so obviously, like Holocaust denial. Honestly, I believe, Daniel, that people who publicly advocate Holocaust denial are not honestly functioning using their brains. They are not morally, because that's where morality starts, is in the use of our own mind. They're not being honest. They're evading. They're systematically evading very easily acquired and important facts. And when that becomes clear to me, well, then that's it. They are immoral in the way they're using their minds, or rather, not using their minds. And when it becomes that bad, that's it. There's no discussing it. They are immoral people taking a position that is so dishonest and groundless that it's, again, how you can't force a mind. And I'm going to tell everyone, the guy who made the earlier comment, look, I can't force your mind. No one can make you believe something against your will. Okay, they can make you say something, perhaps, if they put a gun to your head, but can they really change your honest opinion? You know, that would take a lot of mental conditioning and brainwashing, I guess, to actually do that. In which case, their mind isn't functioning, and they're the equivalent of, you know, someone in a coma. But short of that, if they have a functioning mind and they actually publicly advocate certain opinions, like Holocaust denial or something, or some bizarre mystical view, I'm sorry, they're using their minds immorally. There's no reaching them. Conversation over for me.
Somebody asked, why do you care so much? What else is there to do in life than to care? To live is to care. When I eat my food, I care about what I put in my mouth. When I exercise, you know, I care. When I do anything in my life, it's because I care. How? And when it comes to both, like again, we are here, what, 1.5 hours a day. 22 and a half hours, well, let's say 6 more hours, I still work, so I do my work, but then the 16 more hours the rest of the day are about the rest of my life. Like, yeah, when we come here, this is a political show, this is a cultural commentary, so we obviously focus on this specific thing.
Yeah, you
so
don't
so
have
yeah,
to
you
care about
shouldn't.
your life. You can take poison, rat poison, if you want. Or you don't have to care that a government in the world is killing thousands of its own people on the streets, like in Iran. You don't have to care that there was a slaughter on a beach in Australia. You don't have to care. In fact, you evade all those things which have a direct impact on human life, and you're a human, and presumably you're alive, and so you could evade everything that has anything to do with human life on Earth. Go for it. I can't make you. No, no. Okay, I do. I care about human life. I have what I think is an appropriate hierarchy of values to preserve and protect that human life. I care passionately, okay, about freedom. I care passionately about human life because I'm a human being and I want to live. But you don't have to. You could start the whole subject from a different premise. You could kill yourself, if you could jump off a cliff if you want. I can't stop you from doing that. I care passionately because I think certain things are very important. I care passionately because I place importance on my own life, the lives of the people I love. Is there nothing you don't care? I would ask you, why do you care about anything? What is your standard of value? How do you determine your values? If it's not facts and you go by reason and you put life at the top of your values, what makes you care about anything? Or are you so apathetic that you are indifferent to anything? You see, the reason why I say Holocaust denial is so vile an opinion, why do I say that? Because I care, you see, about my life. I don't want I don't want myself to be a victim of dictatorship and slaughter. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have a different set of values. I don't know. You don't have to care. No. Go throw yourself off a bridge someplace. If you let me
Like
put it this way too, if you care more about red shirts, whether someone wears a red or a blue shirt, than you do about whether or not thousands of humans are being slaughtered on the streets of Iran, or whether innocent Jewish civilians are being slaughtered on a beach in Australia. Okay, you've told me something about your system of values or lack thereof. That's all you've done.
Although I would even say that, like, to some extent, I don't care about like every single person that like there is probably terrible things happening in many places on Earth,
Oh,
and yeah, I would
yeah.
say
That's why I
I
said
don't.
hierarchy of
Yeah.
values. That's why I compared it to the, at one end, the rules in a car park in London versus, there are things that I
No,
care.
even then, I mean, like, Chinese Uyghurs or somebody mentioned Sudan, right? Like, to large extent, yeah, that's not what
I
I'm focusing on.
absolutely care. I do. But the question is when it comes to government policy, should we risk our own young people's lives to do something about some horrible thing? Or should we, and in this context, all we're saying is, what is your opinion about what the relevant policymakers should be? Or what should your opinion about that be? And what is your hierarchy of values? What do you consider more or less important? Uh, you confess it when you tell me you don't care, in effect, that Iranians are being slaughtered by their own government, or that Jewish people are being slaughtered on a beach in Australia. You confess that hierarchy of values to me. Maybe you're getting a whiff of what my hierarchy of values are, and I get a right to have this right to have a hierarchy of values, and to put human life first, and my life has its purpose. Okay, and my only way of figuring that out is reason, and reason got to be based on the facts.
Um,
It's bizarre to even have this conversation, isn't it? I mean, you're saying what I have to believe, or you're saying, okay, look, you can believe whatever you want to believe. No one can force you to believe anything. I believe in freedom. I believe in the freedom to be an idiot, to make a mistake, to make really horrible mistakes. But if you start using force, and violence, now you have become, to that extent, and my enemy. Okay? I will use if you attack me, I will use force back to attack you. So long as you're being peaceful in your idiocy, in your detachment from reality, I will let you free to be just as big an idiot as you want to be. But if you start initiating force, sir or ma'am, guess what? I'm going to fight back and expect force to come back, and 10 times harder than the force you delivered, because you are dictating the terms on which people have to treat you. Okay?
Um, just quickly, because somebody brought up, like, interesting that we don't care about like Gaza or Sudan, which again, that, like, depends what you mean by care. I don't care about like the loss of lives on the Gazan side. I don't care about the loss of lives for Confederate soldiers or Nazis in Germany and civilians as well, or
Oh,
like
I do
during
very
the
much.
Japanese.
I want as many of the enemy to die or be disabled as possible. Oh no, when someone is an aggressor like Nazi Germany and they're slaughtering
In a
people,
sense, I mean care. Like,
yeah,
I'm not mourning their
right.
deaths.
Oh, right. That's right. When the aggressor of an attack gets shot, I'm not sad that the aggressor got shot. I'm pleased that he stopped shooting innocent people. It's really astonishing to have some of these conversations like this. Really, it's so detached from reality, you don't know where to begin. It's so evasive. The answers are so evasive that again, it seems rather senseless to me even to almost have the conversation. They're so far gone, like with a Holocaust denier. They're so far gone that it's, you telling me what to think. Well, anytime anyone ever expresses an opinion, they're in effect saying, this is right. I believe this to be true. I believe this to be good. I believe this to be the proper approach. This could apply to anyone's opinion about anything at any time. So it's not an answer to the specific points that we're making about
Uh,
what ought to be your hierarchy of values in this context.
Uh,
Yikes.
somebody says Daniel probably cares about Russians invading Ukraine. Well, since the border is like 100 kilometers from me, yeah, I definitely do care.
And there's
And
nothing wrong. And he has every right to care more about things that are close to him. Guess what? His life should matter to him. If he didn't care about things that were happening nearby, I would wonder about his hierarchy of values and his system of values. Yes, we
uh,
each get to have our own set of unique priorities, but they all, guess what? Because we're all human beings, there are some universal principles that apply to all of us simply because we're human beings. But no, you don't have to love the music I love or love the wife that I love, of course, and I get to care more about those things than you do. But guess what? Music is a value. It's wonderful to have romantic relationships. Again, it's like so absurd. It's hard for me to even answer responses of this kind because apparently they're that detached from reality or they're being evasive. Like you say, it's putting their fingers in theirs, la 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 la. It's simply a way to evade facts. It's simply a way to evade reason. It's simply a detachment from reality and saying, Daniel, you don't get to have your set of values and priorities and hierarchy of needs and wants. No, each of us do. That's what's called being a human being. Jesus, wow. I'm sorry,
Uh,
but it's really astonishing to me.
Somebody says, does Daniel care about the residents of Donbass? It's really interesting how pretty much the people who support terrorists are always on the side of like every dictatorship. No, no, I don't care for a bunch of seceding states from a legitimate government supported by the Russian state. No, I don't care about like what are we talking? Like somebody said, what about independent investigation of October 7th? Like, piss off. What about the independent investigation of like Fort Sumter? Are we going to like criticize every single in like free nation that gets attacked? And what is independent investigation? Like forcing some other like UN, a bunch of other dictatorships that want to investigate like free countries? Like, piss off. Like this is not a legitimate argument. This is not like you're not dealing with reality. You're not dealing with the actual like needs of free nations. You're just a appeaser of every single dictatorship that exists. I'm not going to like bow down and call for like investigation of a terrible attack on a free nation. I'm not going to like kneel and ask for forgiveness for existence of every single free state. Like piss off. I don't care for any independent investigation of like terrible terrorist attacks. Like give me a break.
Thank you, Daniel, for passionately expressing your values like that. I have to agree with you and the emotion with which you approached it, even. Ukraine was invaded by a dictatorship, okay? And, I have a president, Mr. Trump, who cannot distinguish, it seems to me, between the attacker and the people being attacked. Okay. And so every little thing that may be wrong with Ukraine, and Ukraine is not a perfect state. And okay, guess what? To bring up every little thing that's wrong with the Ukraine as a government is absolutely detached from reality and shows me that you are dropping the context, that you have some other agenda other than the concern with the most important thing, that a dictatorship invaded its neighbor. Okay, that sets my agenda here, and I'm not going to start going into little teeny detailed criticisms of Ukraine in that context. It would be wrong. It would be epistemologically, mentally, it would be a distortion. Morally, it would be a distortion. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, may have said some off-color things about African Americans. Okay, he freed the slaves. He fought the people who were enslaving those people. Okay, now you can tell me which you think is more important. You can tell me which you think we ought to be focused on. And if you're using it as an excuse to say there shouldn't have been a civil war and that everything Abraham Lincoln did was wrong, then I'm going to tell you you're detached from reality. You're not epistem. Your mind is warped in the way it's thinking, and your values therefore will express a warped sense of what's important, more important, less important, more valuable, less valuable. You really, people, what you need is philosophy. Everybody needs philosophy. Everybody needs to know how they're going to go about believing things to be true or false. Everybody needs a set of values. They need morality. And these things are, you just can't avoid them or evade them. And if your politics isn't, your political opinions aren't determined by a rational approach, and say you use, some mystical approach, you go to the oracle at Delphi to determine what's true and false, Or if you see what I'm saying? Then your values will be warped. And when you apply those values to politics, your political opinion is going to be warped. And you're going to end up, in effect, defending Vladimir Putin and an invasion of another country. Or you'll end up defending the Confederate South that had slaves, if we go back 150 plus years ago. Okay? You're going to end up being a defender of monstrous things because your values are warped. You won't be able to understand politics properly because you're not using your mind properly. Philosophy is an inescapable subject. And I myself would recommend that you read the books of Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff because I adhere to a philosophy called objectivism, which gives me guidance on how to know, how to use reason and logic to integrate facts, how to approach the subject of values, what's important, what's good, and that informs in turn my political opinions. And I think if you evade those more basic subjects, you're going to get all messed up when it comes to politics and everything else, every other decision you have to make in life. Okay? So become more thoughtful and philosophical, people. Understand the importance of philosophy, at least, and decide how you're going to figure stuff out, what values are and what is important to you and what's good and bad to you, and use that in a consistent and principled way to understand politics and develop your political opinions. Shy of that, I promise you, you will be detached from reality.
We have a super chat from Bondi. Thank you so much. Just quickly on Ukraine, somebody says Zelensky must be prepping for his latest begging ball world tour. Again, would you say the same thing about Ben Franklin? You know, was he begging, running and begging to France for like help? Like his nation is at war. Yeah, I do anything I can to prevent that or to stop that. Why are we like acting as if like trying to stop war or trying to defend yourself is some kind of uh like what begging? Like again, like I've said, would you say the same about Ben Franklin? Would you say the same about like the Prussian military advisors that came to help the American Revolutionary War? To would you say that to like the Jewish investors, many Jewish investors actually that helped to fund American Revolutionary War? Like, come on, can we like actually deal like like this
Someone
is
is
not
burning down
this
your
is not a
house and you
game. This
complain
is not a
about your
game.
the decor and your, someone's burning down my house. Well, you made some really bad decisions about the carpeting and the curtains. I mean, yeah, begging, yeah, they are being invaded, they're being attacked, their cities are being bombed, their people are being killed. They're going to ask everyone in the world for help. That is the correct thing to do. Uh, if you were being attacked, would you ask for help? Or would you just sit there and let them beat you to shreds?
Yeah, you know, those like murdered people or people who had attempted murder on them running and begging the police to like investigate it
Yeah, it's
and you know
when
put
there's a
them on
crime in
trial.
the neighborhood, they're out there. When you call the police and call 911, help, help, I'm being attacked. You're begging for help.
Yikes.
Okay.
Well, you just
Okay.
you just want somebody else to like solve your problems instead of dealing with yeah.
I just, no, really, it's insane. People, think about it. That indeed that we have to go through it this basically, this 1 + 1 = 2 kind of way, kind of tells you everything you need to know about some of these posters and commenters. Um,
Yeah, and I think this comes from the way I mean, in some ways it's good because it comes from the fact that how great the Western world is, the fact that we are completely separated from war. We are complete, like who starves in Western nations? Who like really like when we talk about poverty in the West, it's like people who have two iPhones, probably two cars, who might even own their house or might actually live in like urban area, right? And therefore have like higher life expenses. Like
in a country where you worry more about dieting and overeating and getting too many calories in your, okay, that is a country and a culture that does not have a starvation problem. Okay, when in my country it is being overweight is the main problem for people even on the poorer end of things. In fact, as you go down the income scale, that's where you have the bigger weight problems. Maybe because they're not eating proper food and stuff, but it's not because there's a lack of food in their diet. Okay, you're talking about an entirely different context than, in most of human history, people were faced the reality of just the regular reality of periodic famines, the regular reality of periodic plagues that would wipe out a significant portion of the population. In the 14th century, what percentage of the European population was killed in two massive waves of bubonic plague? Um, we live in a different world. We live in a different world because there are comparatively free societies where the mind has been liberated and people can think for themselves and produce values and improve their own lives and develop new technologies and say what they want to say and write and try and convince other people. Freedom is this condition that has, in the last 300 years or so, revolutionized the world. Revolutionized the world. You don't have to think that's important or good. You could return to this period of time when famine and plague were regularly sweeping across different areas of the world. And again, you don't have to think, you don't have to care that that's important. In fact, you could right now shut off all of your technology. You could right now shut off your brain and not think about any of these things or their relevance to your life. Now, I would say that's a suicidal course. You're not acting in your own self-interest if you do that, if you drop all that context. If a country like Russia invades a country like Ukraine and you don't care about it, okay, then I would ask you to consider maybe the implications to you. Should some aggressor invade your country at some point, some terrorist bomb your city at some point? But no, 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 you can cover your ears, cover your eyes, and pretend that that doesn't exist, not have a principled policy about that in your own head, and think that that's safe for you and think that's good for your life, that that will improve your life, your chances of living, okay, go for it.
Yeah, and we did want to talk about anti-Zionism, but probably we are a bit too far.
We've gone off
Uh,
the rails a bit there, but it does say something, doesn't it? The mental approach that people take, such as many of these commenters here, will determine the mental approach you take to knowing and thinking will determine everything else. Your approach to basic value questions, what's good, what's right and wrong, will determine what you think is right and wrong in politics and personal choices and everything else. That's why it stresses to me the urgent priority of philosophy as a topic. Whether you're a physicist, an engineer, a doctor, a street sweeper, a janitor, a carpenter, philosophy is important to you. Philosophy is not optional, right? I don't have, there are things that I really relatively don't have to care about. But what I do have to care about, right? What I do have to care about is the functioning of my mind, how I come to my opinions. What I do have to care about is my value system. What is good and what is right, what is bad and what is wrong, and how I determine that. These are not optional questions for any of us because they will shape your opinions about everything.
yeah, and again, I would only say, like, people, I think especially this comes from the way, I mean, I'm thinking of people like the Young Turks, the people who like talk about politics but don't actually do anything in there. I think there is like a gamification of, or not gamification, but sort of it feels like a game, like politics. Like say, oh, why do you care? Or like, well, what if this is happening? Or why should we help Ukraine? Or things like that. I mean, it reminds me of the people who like during the Civil War, like went to look at the battle and made like a picnic to like look at like people like killing themselves, killing each other. Like this kind of complete misunderstanding of like what war is and what like how much of a benefit we have from living in civilized world. And I'm not the one to say like, country needs a war, or like the children have to go to like army so they like learn how the life is. But I think at some point, yeah, there might need to be something like that. Like people don't realize how how great it is, and it makes people not appreciative of what it takes and what needs to happen to like uphold it. My favorite example of this is like vaccines. So people who say, "Well, why even take polio vaccines? Nobody dies from polio." It's like, yeah, because like for 2 decades, the whole American nation was focused on like battling polio disease, where the person who did discover the vaccine was like a national hero for like
Hero.
forever because of what he did. And yeah, people don't seem to appreciate like any uh like what it takes to actually uphold the current system or the current healthcare or anything in those regards.
Yeah, no,
Like it
you
really
don't
does
have
seem
to.
like people need to start dying from measles for people to realize like why we actually started why vaccines are good, even if with all the potential side effects.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? No, you can not care that someone dedicated themselves years of study and research to develop a vaccine that saved people from death and paralysis. Okay, you don't have to care about that. You could value something else. You could not treat the heroes of the mind differently than say mystics who flagellated their own backs in the Dark Ages. You could make a hero out of Adolf Hitler if you want, rather than understanding what a villain he was. You know how he slaughtered 11 million civilians in the continent of Europe, how he started a massive war that killed. You know, yeah, you don't have to care. You don't. Nothing will force you to do that, and nothing will force you to stay alive either, right? Let me suggest that if you do want to be alive, a certain set of values kicks in. If you do want to know the truth, a certain kind of process of knowing is mandatory, and it's not automatic. People, as I say, used to go to the Delphi, Oracle of Delphi to find out the truth. They consulted the equivalent of a crystal ball. When you could, St. Paul said he was taken up into heaven, and the levels of heaven, and had this mystic vision, and you could base your whole life on the philosophy that you find in the New Testament, because you think the mystic revelations of some ancient Christian is the way to understand what's true and false. And you could believe that, getting into heaven is more important than anything that happens here on earth, because these mystic revelations tell you that there's this heaven up there. And I believe that that will set you on a course, a chain reaction, where you'll be at war with life on earth. Ultimately, you'll be at war with your own body, like those mystics from the Middle Ages who did torment their own bodies, take oaths of celibacy and poverty, and whipped their back, and slept on rocks. You know, you could do that. Sure. That is the scope of human free will, human choice. We have the choice to be our own destroyers. We have the choice, on the other hand, to think and, right, to use reason and to care about life. And if that's your orientation, then the discoverer of a vaccine will be a hero to you, right? If it isn't, then something else is going to be important. And you're sneaking in the valuing of death. You know, you're becoming a death worshiper, in effect, ultimately. And, there's some of these issues there's no wiggle room here. You're going to allow some degree of toxic poison into your life. Okay, I just don't want, I want this little corner to be free from reason and facts. I want this little corner to be anti-life. Okay, what's determining that little corner? Not reason and facts. What's determining that little corner? Not life, but the standard of death. To that extent, you will be encouraging disease, death, right? Yeah, our culture has changed, unfortunately. There was a pinnacle moment, for all of human history. You had all this slavery and, theocracies and absolute monarchs and pharaohs and so forth. And in the last few centuries, something really amazing and unprecedented happened to the human species. The Enlightenment changed all that. And suddenly slavery wasn't cool anymore. And suddenly science was really cool. And suddenly human life changed dramatically. Life expectancy went up, infant mortality went down, populations exploded. Humans then got smartphones and could communicate in real time, like I am with Daniel, who's on another continent right now. That happened, that innovation happened within my lifetime. Okay, you don't take that for granted, ladies and gentlemen. That's not automatic. Human beings this species has been on this planet for many tens of thousands of years. And only in the last 3 centuries or so have dramatic improvements along these lines taken place. And they were not causeless, and they were not accidental, and they were not coincidental. It was the approach people took to knowing, finding out, determining what's true and false, determining what's right and wrong. That is what made the difference. So yeah, I do have an opinion. I have a strong opinion. I'm advising you to check it out. And if you agree to share my opinion, because I think it will make a difference. But no, I will be the last person in the world to pass a law that would tell you what to think, or try to, because I can't, or what to say, because I ought not to. You should be free. It's that freedom that has liberated the mind to give us all these wonderful improvements. So I'm not going to oppose the social condition that made all those improvements possible and force you to say something or not say something that you don't believe. And I'm not going to try and force you to believe with me. No, that would be counterproductive for the reason I just explained, right? But there is a right and wrong. There is a true or false. And if that bothers you, that someone says this is right or wrong or true or false, then you are an enemy of what is true and what is right.
So somebody brought up something about Ukraine had decades to free itself from Russian corruption after it claimed its independence. Without the US, Ukraine would still be part of the USSR. But that's not true. Ukraine and Belarus and Russia together dissembled the USSR, so that's not even true. But even then, like I'm happy Spain, France, and Dutch like bankers didn't say that to themselves, to like American revolutionaries, like, hey, free yourself. Why should we do something? I'm glad they looked at, and for most of them it was pragmatic, especially from France. It's just, hey, we can kick Britain's butt. Let's
Oh,
do
in
this.
the European context, Britain, was actually if it was just Europe, I would say Britain was the place to be in the 18th century. You know that? The absolute monarchy of France was not my preferred government over the dramatically and rapidly liberalizing Great Britain. Okay? On the other hand, was America smart in appealing to Britain's enemies and rivals, as well listed by Daniel there? France, without France's material support, America might not have won the revolution. The Battle of Yorktown might have come out very, very differently without the assistance of the French Navy. Okay, but guess what? It was a good thing that Ben Franklin went over to France and asked for money and asked for help, because guess what? It was better and when America happened, was that better for the whole world or worse for the whole world? You
And
tell
also,
me.
we kind of hit two birds with one stone, right? Because France bankrupted itself, that also fueled the French Revolution.
Two
Although
birds with one stone. It did. It helped to bankrupt France, which kind of led to the French. But unfortunately,
yeah,
you see, worse ideas and ideas in French culture generally. I mean, men like Rousseau were not like philosophers like Rousseau were not like philosophers like Locke. And guess what? There was a culture in France that was different than the culture, even in Great Britain, much less the United States at the time. But it did cause a French Revolution and the end of an absolute monarchy there. Now, it also caused a terrible slaughter, I understand, and a reign of terror under Robespierre and all that. America did a revolution, it got Thomas Jefferson. France does a revolution, it gets Napoleon. But as the 19th century proceeded, dramatic liberalization happened across Europe, across Europe. No, I'm not in favor of, Napoleon declaring himself emperor and trying to take over all of Europe. No, bad, bad. On the other hand, in the 1830s and 40s, you're well after those things. You're telling me that the ideas that partly were inspiring the French Revolution weren't dramatically improving the conditions in Western Europe dramatically? There was actually a relatively good period of freedom in France at the very time I'm talking about. In the middle of the 1800s, Europe was liberalizing. Rights were becoming recognized. Governments were becoming radically more moral. No, perfection had not yet been achieved. But if you're telling me that things didn't start getting better in Europe in the 1830s and 1840s and so forth, then you and I, again, we have a different set of values.
Somebody asked who funded Robespierre. I'm sure it was the Jews. That's the answer he's expecting.
He was a Mossad operative. No, 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 no. Robespierre was a fanatic. He was a fanatic. I mean, fanatics rarely need funding.
Somebody
Killing
asked.
is cheap.
Somebody said they didn't do it to help the US, they did it to weaken the United Kingdom. Okay, you're close actually. So we are not helping Ukraine because we necessarily care that much about Ukraine. We want to weaken our enemy, Russia. Yeah, you got it.
Bingo. Now you have uncontrollably lurched into the truth there, my friend. I care about myself. It matters to me. And guess what? I'm going to put my value priorities there too. Now, as we just said, if I had to choose between the Ancien regime of France and the liberalized government of Britain at the time in the 18th century, I would choose Britain. On the other hand, if I wanted an even more free place, the United States to come into being, and set off the chain reaction that it was America in the 19th century, okay, then guess what? France helping us is a good thing. And if France saw it as in their interest to, stick it to their rival Britain, their centuries-old rival, the island to the north of them, then, okay, let's take advantage of what they see as in their interest, even though it did bankrupt them. So what? I would say don't bankrupt America in our help of Ukraine, but we don't have to. We don't have to. I would urge Mr. Trump. It's not that we're bankrupting ourselves here. Well, he didn't want to pay a dime. Well, I think that a dime is worth stopping an aggressive dictator because an aggressive dictator is a threat to us. By the way, an aggressive dictator with
Not
nuclear
even just
weapons.
like Russia is a threat to the US, like period. That's not even like we are not even talking about like my favorite example is like Turkmenistan, right? Yeah, Turkmenistan is probably the biggest dictatorship that is right now, like probably even more than North Korea to some extent. We don't have to care because one, nobody knows where it actually is, and two, it's not outwardly aggressive towards anybody right now, despite the fact that every dictatorship is a potential threat. But Russia is killing people in the United Kingdom, is like attacking with hacker attacks, attacking like Western infrastructure, is getting involved in all European as well as American elections, was helping the Houthis attack international shipping, is helping Iran, meaning killing Americans, killing Israelis, is in pact with China, or has somewhat of a dealings with China, which again is also a clear threat to America. So we don't have to make a case that maybe potentially someday Russia is a threat. No, Russia is a
There
threat
you
right now.
go, integrating facts again, using logic, Daniel, to figure stuff out. Yes, Russia, obviously, with its nuclear arsenal, is a threat to the United States, and indeed, as a dictatorship that kills people at home and abroad, and invades places like Ukraine, and is allied with China and Iran, they are, in fact, a threat to every civilized country on this planet. And we ought to care if you care about your civilized, comparatively free country.
Somebody says, what was it? the major difference is that Ukraine was already freed by the US, so your argument is fallacy. Well, I'm sure glad during the Civil War, the other nations didn't say to themselves, well, we already helped them during the revolution. Why should we do something now? It's like, how much do you need that to say that this like maps kind of again,
Russia
I don't know.
attacked the
Yeah.
whole of Ukraine. It wanted to reabsorb Ukraine. There was an assault on Kyiv. Okay? They don't want Ukraine to be independent. They want all of you. And if you listen to Putin, he wants to restore as much of the old Soviet empire as possible. He has aggressive ambitions, period. He wants as much of the world as he can get. At one point, the Soviet Union controlled a good chunk of this planet. If you add all communists, they controlled about a third of this planet. Okay? They are an aggressive threat to everyone. Everyone. Okay? They're no longer officially communist in Russia. They're more, Russian Orthodox nationalist. But guess what? He still wants greater Russia. He still said so. He's still aiming for it. Look at what he's doing in Ukraine. He kills his political opponents, even when they're in England, at home and abroad, as Daniel just pointed out. At what point will it sink in people's heads that, an aggressive dictatorship is... the reason why I worry about North Korea, they got the nuclear bomb. The reason why I worry about Iran is, however primitive and however near or far from getting a nuclear bomb they are, they're seeking it. And they've been attacking Israel. And they've been supporting the Houthis that cut off international trade. And by the way, they've killed hundreds upon hundreds of Americans, my countrymen. You have to integrate all the facts. The only thing that can do that is reason. That's how you determine what's true and false. And you've got to have the right system of values. You've got to, and only that will help you, inform you to see that dictatorship is a state of war of a government against its own people. And there are many reasons why dictatorships are the cause of war. The comparatively less free countries are the ones that are always attacking the more free countries. You say Ukraine is not a perfectly free country. And even it's wild how far this goes. They'll even say Israel is imperfect, and then look at all the neighbors around it, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Okay? No, you have to make value assessments here, right? You've got a country that's truly compared to, it's living in the 21st century versus medieval savagery that has no rights for women, no freedom of speech, slaughter, in the case of Iran, currently slaughtering tens of thousands of its own people. You've got to be able to have a method whereby you can evaluate objectively two things. Even if the one thing that you're going to support is in some way imperfect, I really don't like the way they're, you could say that at any moment too, right? You could say that, the people who in Great Britain, we're on Ayn Rand Center, UK, in the 1680s, really it was anti-Catholic bigotry that got rid of James II and caused the Glorious Revolution. Or to the extent that it was, obviously it should never have happened. Well, then you wouldn't have had the English Bill of Rights. You wouldn't have had the radical liberalization that occurred when William and Mary came in, right? And you could say, but William and Mary were still monarchs, and maybe Britain ought not to have monarchs at all. There is a saying which is sometimes I can understand. Sometimes you have to be careful with it, but don't let what your idea of the perfect be prevent you from doing the good.
So sort of, well, one thing I've seen around in the chat is something like, US needs to focus on China, which again, yeah, I agree. So why are we putting tariffs on Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan? Why are we putting tariffs on our allies if we want to focus on China? And here is my thing. Like, I will criticize EU nations and what they're doing, like their dealings with China, their dealings with Russia. It's terrible. But, to put it into perspective, you should expect from people what they have actual capability for, right? When it comes to EU nations, we are like I'm sorry, but we are in many cases talking about like retarded children. Like I'm sorry, but like EU states like suck at almost anything they're doing when it comes to dealing with Russia, when it comes to dealing with China. But like America is that talented child that is like frustrated that teacher is tough on them. Yes, I expect more from US. I expect not from US not to be retarded just like the EU states are. I expect it to do better than simply like the
Well,
bare minimum when it comes to dealing with threats. Like yeah, China is a American enemy because America is the only nation that can actually do with it.
well,
America is the only nation that is actually capable
you
around
know,
the world.
the people who say we should focus on China will say that's why Trump is, saber rattling about Greenland. That's why Trump is doing Venezuela. Okay, but wait a minute here. Russia is in alliance with China. A blow to Russia is a blow to China. Okay, if Greenland and Venezuela are relevant to our standing up to China, let me suggest that standing up to Russia is relevant to our to our issue with China. Yeah, standing up and not, as you point out, causing greater problems for Japan, South Korea, etc. So be at least consistent with your viewpoint and realize that if Greenland and Venezuela are relevant to America versus China, let me suggest that Russia is relevant to to our issue with China. No, again, integrate all the facts, ladies and gentlemen. Um, you drop context conveniently. You evade that there is any role, for example, with Iran, how that might affect China. Well, China gets a bunch of its oil from Iran. Iran sells drones to Russia. Russia gets some of its troops from North Korea. Now, you see how there's a little circle here that's working? How China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are kind of working together, and how a blow to one would be a blow against all those others. So if Greenland and Venezuela are important to America versus China, let me suggest Russia and Iran are also relevant to America's problem with China. It's funny how these bad guys will get together and work together. Now, if America weren't there, do I think they might be at each other's throats? Yeah, yeah, but you better believe it. But America is the only country, as Daniel points out, that can do anything about China. America is the country that ought to be taking out Iran right now. Right, absolutely. And it is for America's interest that America ought to be doing this. When these people use this term, America first, I am being America first when I say we ought to take out Iran. I'm being America first when I say we ought to support Ukraine. If it's relevant to Trump people out there, if it's relevant in the case of Greenland and Venezuela, let me suggest it's even more relevant in the cases of Ukraine and Iran.
Um, Somebody says tariffs are minor against Japan and South Korea. Next time you get a 15 to 20% like tax increase wherever you are, I hope you'll say the same thing. Oh, this is just a minor. It's just 15 to 20% more of my money that will be stolen. What's the big deal? And also, why are we doing that? Like, is it okay to like drink only 2 beers before you like sit at your car before you drive your car somewhere? Like, why would you do any? Like, oh, I only shot myself. I didn't shoot myself in the head. I just shot myself in the hand. Like,
I'm
why are we
opposed to
doing? Why are we
self-shooting
shooting
altogether.
ourselves?
Yes, look, it was only one foot I shot myself in. Okay, well, I'm opposed to shooting yourself in general. Okay? Don't, someone identifies something as truly poisonous with no value. Why should I take any of it?
And again, that's the whole thing. Like, I would even agree with some of the like Trump's like goals or something that he at least theoretically says he wants to achieve. But he like I feel like I could do better in the White House. Like I could fulfill his agenda better. Like if I knew
Fulfill
what
his
he
agenda better.
like, because there's just so many like mishaps, so many like
No,
things we would
part of
like.
it is just chest thumping, right? Greenland is a great example. Do you suppose that Denmark and people in Greenland would be willing to, if you explain to them, look, there's security interests that would affect all of the North Atlantic? Do you think they might be amenable to, say, military bases there that would help with defensive shield
There
programs?
are already there. That there is a U.S.
Of
military
course,
base there.
there we've had military bases there. If we said, "Look, China's got all these rare earth minerals, and we really need to develop it," do you think that we could have arranged some
By the
agreement
way,
again?
okay, here I have to throw it because I like, and this I would give to Trump like, because I'm not sure if I ever mentioned it on the show. Like, James, did you know Trump already solved this? China already tried to buy, like, build an airport and export minerals. Do you know when? During the first Trump administration, when he stopped it, and then it wasn't a problem. During Biden administration, not even once China offered to like buy anything in Greenland. Like it wasn't an issue because Trump solved it in his first administration. Like it wasn't a problem anymore. Why are we still dealing with this? This is a solved thing.
He can acquire. In fact, well, let me suggest that his "we need to take over Greenland" is actually counterproductive. It makes the people involved less likely to be cooperative with you, not more likely. You're complicating a situation, not solving a problem. Um, in any case, yeah, if Greenland is relevant to our issue with China, then obviously Iran and Russia are relevant to our problem with China. And it's relevant to the security of NATO. It's relevant to the security of Japan. It's relevant to the, and guess what? Anything else is to say, to look at America first differently is to say that our interests and values are necessarily in conflict, even with our allies. Now, that's just factually false and a counterproductive approach. Okay. No, America should not act altruistically. That is to say, self-sacrificially, do something foolish. But guess what? That would be foolish on America's part. And what I'm asking Mr. Trump to be is truly selfish, truly put America's interests first. That's what I'm disagreeing with about his policy. It's not actually coordinated with America's long-term interests. Okay, it's not in our long-term interests to alienate the Kingdom of Denmark. It's not in our long-term interests to risk a trade war with Japan. In fact, it's counterproductive if China is the rival here, as Daniel points out. No, but it's
Uh,
America first because he's just pounding his chest to say, well, you see, if I hadn't threatened taking over Greenland, they wouldn't come to the. No, 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 no. That's just him pounding his chest so that he can look tough. It's more about his ego. You know, at a recent prayer breakfast, Mr. Trump said just that. You know, if I'd lost the 2020 election, it would have affected my ego for the rest of my life.
if
Well, you did. You did. And if I'd lost this last election, it would have affected my ego for the. So for him to pretend that he lost the 2020 election, or not that he didn't actually, which he did, to pretend that he won the 2020 election in his mind is actually critical. Now, that's a bit scary when we're talking about the leader of a country, much less the leader of the country with America's military arsenal. It's kind of scary when his fragile ego is affecting any of his decisions as the president of the United States, isn't it? Because let me just ask people to separate in their minds what Trump claims is America first when it really could just be Trump's fragile ego first. Trump getting a ego assuagement, fragile ego assuagement from something.
Somebody says Ayn Rand is rolling over in her grave right now. Well, I don't pretend to speak for Ayn Rand, and I don't pretend to say Ayn Rand would 100% definitely be behind what my view of the world right now is. I would expect she would have probably a very unique stance on pretty much every single issue as she ever had that I cannot even pretend to imagine what it might be. And it would probably be very good and very convincing and very surprising to see, like she had with pretty much any issue she touched upon. So I don't pretend to speak for her, and I don't pretend to say that I know exactly what her opinion would be on this situation. But do you? Do you know that?
I She did give us some hints, for example, about her idea about what we ought to have done about Iran back in 1979. She was asked in her last public appearance in New Orleans in 1982 about Russia, and they weren't very positive comments, I can tell you right there. And, you know, I happen to know Ayn Rand's intellectual heir, Leonard Peikoff, who knew Ayn Rand very well for 30 years. And I know what his opinions are about Ukraine and Iran, and they're in line with ours. So if we have any gauge to what Ayn Rand would have thought, let me suggest your best the best person alive still on this planet to give us a gauge of what Ayn Rand would have thought is Leonard Peikoff, and he has very strong opinions against Russia and for Ukraine and against Iran as such, that they ought to be taken out as a government. But again, that's Leonard Peikoff. Even though he knew her well for over 30 years, it's not any substitute for Ayn Rand. I do not claim, as Daniel says, to speak for Ayn Rand, who's been dead for more than 40 years. No, I think that's impossible. On the other hand, gauging what she did say towards the end of her life about both Russia and Iran, and gauging what her intellectual heir does think about those issues, specifically those two issues in foreign policy today. Uh, I think I have some good guess as to what she would have said. On the other hand, let me double down on something else Daniel said. Please do not confuse my opinions with my personal applications of objectivism with objectivism itself. Do not do that. What I say and my applications of those ideas are mine, and you cannot attribute them to Ayn Rand. No, no, no. But I have a pretty good idea, sir, that Ayn Rand would not be rolling in her grave about what we're saying about Russia and Iran, because I do have some evidence that indicates to me that she would be very much as her intellectual heir, Dr. Peikoff, is very much supporting Ukraine against Russia and very much in favor of taking out entirely the government of Iran. I go by the evidence that I can go by if what Ayn Rand believes is the question here. But please don't confuse my opinions with Ayn Rand's. I cannot speak for her. And please do not even confuse my applications of her philosophy, objectivism, with objectivism itself. People have done that. People have said, well, Jim Valiant says this, that's objectivism. No, it is not. It is not objectivism. How Jim Valiant applies objectivism. Objectivism is what Ayn Rand taught. Okay? But I do have, more than a hint about what she believed about Russia and Ukraine, what she believed about Russia and what she believed about Iran. She didn't live to see the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that's sad. She fled, she escaped the horrors of the Soviet Union. And she, unfortunately, if she'd only lived a few more years, she could have seen the collapse of the Soviet Union. But you know something? She was asked about Russia, and she said, is there any hope for Russia in particular? Her one-word answer was no. She did say that the Soviet Union could be brought down without the loss of a single American life. She was right about that. But as a culture, she said, no, not in her foreseeable lifetime was there a hope for Russia. And so guess what? I have some indication of what she might believe about the current issues in Russia versus Ukraine and with Iran versus Israel, because she did give us more than a hint about those issues while she was still alive.
Yeah, and even I mean, the person who brings up Ayn Rand, I I would be surprised if they consider themselves objectivists, but maybe they do. And again, I think it's for people who say, Ayn Rand, because he says Ayn Rand would have definitely supported Trump. For people who say that, I don't think you really have any appreciation for like her ideas or her personality or her philosophy. The idea that you would 100% know that she would be 100% in favor of Trump,
When she had
and
to
then
vote,
without any nuance, like just
oh
100%
no,
support with
she
like.
held her nose to vote for Richard Nixon. You know, she was an anti-Nixonite for Nixon, but only because it was the context of the time, especially against McGovern. But you know something? When Nixon tried to impose wage and price controls, she wrote an article that was just very strongly against it and called it a moratorium on brains. So because she said, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Nixon, that didn't stop her from being critical, sharply, publicly critical of things Nixon was doing.
Well, with that, I think we've pretty much covered everything around the earth. Uh, I'm just
um,
trying to go through. Somebody says Atlas is shrugging, which I don't even know what means in this context. Like, who is Atlas in this context? Uh,
well, the to the extent you, there are many ways in which that novel turned out to be prophetic. Not prophetic in some magical or mystical way. Ayn Rand understood the role of ideas in history and the role of certain ideas and their impact. And so people are often making the comparison, saying, "My God, she was, she seemed to have this powerful vision that could predict the future." No, she was a rational person who understood the power of ideas and the impact of certain fundamental philosophical ideas. So I would really highly recommend everyone read Atlas Shrugged. You will not only read this magnificent, beautifully written, exquisite work of art, the novel Atlas Shrugged, you'll also gain tremendous insight into philosophy and the power of the mind in human life. Ayn Rand Center UK does an Atlas Shrugged book club, and they have regular meetings where they discuss chapter by chapter that immortal novel, Atlas Shrugged. Reading that novel, for me, was the most intellectually important event of my life. So if I have a book recommendation to give anyone and everyone in the world, it's read Atlas Shrugged. Um, it was the most important book I ever read. Let me just put it that way.
um, Somebody brings up Ayn Rand again, saying she voted for Nixon. She voted for FDR as well. Like things have context, not like you just say one thing and that's it. Like
She voted for Nixon and criticized what Nixon did. Both of those things can be true at the same time. She did not vote for Reagan. She thought Reagan was taking, in principle, the Republican Party in a dark direction, and just to oppose the direction that he was putting him in. And originally, back in the 60s, when he was governor of California, she just said nice things about Ronald Reagan. But by the 1980s, when he was in bed with the moral majority, she said, no, that's taking a dark turn to the Republican Party, so I'm going to, on principle, not vote for Ronald Reagan. She voted for Barry Goldwater, but she had all kinds of critical things to say about Barry Goldwater. When it came to Adlai Stevenson and Eisenhower in the 50s, to her, it wasn't even worth voting. She would not vote if she didn't see much a hill of beans worth of difference between the two candidates. In fact, when you go back to FDR, as Daniel points out, Herbert Hoover was advocating a welfare state. And FDR at the time was advocating was opposed to prohibition. So her first vote for president as an American citizen was to vote for FDR because he opposed prohibition. And after all, his Republican opponent was, New Deal light. Context, people. Good Lord. I don't
yeah,
know how Ayn Rand would have voted for president these last 2 or 3 times. Okay. I don't. And I wouldn't claim to. I wouldn't pretend to. I can't speak for Ayn Rand. And voting is an application of philosophy anyway. If I give you a voting recommendation, do not confuse my application of objectivism with objectivism itself. And I hope that people stop doing that. That's my application is not objectivism, even though I advocate objectivism. Those are two different things.
yeah, and again, it's like, could I see Ayn Rand like voting for Trump in the last 3 elections, or voting for Democrats in the last 3 elections, or abstaining, or doing some strategic voting. I could see, like with generally objectivists, right? I think there are good arguments on pretty much with all of those choices, not voting or voting for either side. I think there are really bad arguments for voting third party. But
Yeah.
generally, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you couldn't be critical of today's Republicans and the right, if you couldn't be critical of today's left, then I can tell you right there, you're misapplying objectivism. That I'm pretty confident about. If you can't breathe a word of criticism of Donald Trump, and I can tell you, you're almost certainly not even in the ballpark of objectivism, but within a certain range. Look, Ayn Rand, as I say, has been dead for 40 years. So, and besides, why should it matter, really? Even if she were still alive, could you get your mind, wrap your mind around the idea of agreeing with all of her philosophical principles and then disagreeing with her about some application of it? The fact that some person believes a certain thing or would have done certain thing is a pure argument from authority. It's not because Ayn Rand believes something or would have done something that I believe something or would do something. It's because I agree after careful thought with her philosophical principles that I agree with her philosophical principles. Can different people apply them, as Daniel points out, within a range, at least within a certain range, and still be applying them? Yeah, but there are limits. I can tell you what my limits are. She wouldn't have been uncritical if she said, I'm voting for Trump about Trump. She would have said, I don't like tariffs. I think it's a pretty easy bet right there. Okay?
Somebody is a very, like, in caps lock. Daniel, did you vote for Kamala? So I'm actually illegal immigrant into America, and I voted for Kamala 5 times actually. So yeah, I'm one of those.
No, but it is just massively silly. Ayn Rand believed you should think for the basic normative advice that her philosophy gives is think for yourself. There really is no other kind of thinking, but thinking for yourself. Use your own, exercise your own independent judgment. If it isn't, then it's not objectivism right there. If it is just if Ayn Rand, someone were to hear, if Ayn Rand, I can tell you this too, if Ayn Rand were to hear someone say, well, Miss Rand, I'm going to go by whatever you say because you say it, she would have said, don't, stop, right there. You're not being an objectivist. She went to a doctor once, and the doctor said to her, Miss Rand, I don't agree with your philosophy. I'm not really an adherent of your philosophy. She said, just be a good doctor, and you're an adherent of my philosophy. The most important thing to her was being good at your job, being rational about how you approach things. That was her value hierarchy. That was her hierarchy of how you approach things. It's not agreeing with her that was important. It would make you more of an objectivist in her mind that you were thinking for yourself and you were a good doctor.
Yeah, and I would say the same about when it comes to voting. Like, I think even when it comes to voting, a lot of it is personal, like your personal values. Like just to bring up an example of somebody like Alex Epstein, somebody that like really cares about the energy industry. I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't know like how he voted or if he even has like talks about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he would be much in favor of Republicans or Republican candidate than sort of let's say your average objectivist, because his specific values are heavily tied to this one issue, right?
Exactly. I said some things about Trump's ego earlier. You could tell that I am a critic of Trump. Okay. Let me say something good about Trump. Trump's policy about energy regulation is qualitatively head and shoulders above anything a Democrat would have given us. The drill, baby, drill is a slogan, deregulate it, getting rid of all of these green energy regulations that we have in this country. That is outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you, Mr. Trump, for ending the Green New Deal and Biden's energy regulations. He's even going back to change Obama's environmental regulations. Thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you. America and the world will be a better place because of your energy policy, Mr. Trump. And at the same time, guess what? I can be critical of Mr. Trump and his tariffs. I can still be critical of Mr. Trump with his statements about statements about his fragile ego. I can still be critical of him if he doesn't keep his promise and do something about Iran and do it quickly. I can be critical. Look, it's an amazing thing. People drop context completely. Logically, the fallacy of ad hominem is saying bad man, therefore his argument is false. The argument from authority, it's saying good man, therefore his argument must be true. But guess what? Bad men can make good arguments, and good men can make bad arguments. There's another fallacy, ad populum, because so many people believe it, it must be true. Okay? You can't determine truth by opinion poll, and you can't determine the truth by someone's character, right? It's a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy that objectivism strongly advocates Aristotelian logic in this respect. So if you're not using that, if you're not aware of logical fallacies and using logic properly, right there, you're not being an objectivist. That I can tell you.
So we should start wrapping up. So James, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Here. I do all kinds of special programming for the Ayn Rand Center UK, but for paid members. On Sunday, we're doing a careful analysis of Leonard Peikoff's book about objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. It's a wonderful seminar. I think we're doing having a great discussion. And there's other special things you get here. But Ayn Rand Center UK, where I'm appearing right now, is the most important place where you will hear my opinions if they seem rational to you. But I can also be found at Facebook, James Stevens Valiant. Hit me up over there. I'm there almost every day answering questions.
Somebody says it took 6 months to prepare for the liberation of Kuwait. Right, we only had 50 years to prepare for Iran. Why should I expect America to be ready at any point? But with that, I would only say, people should, think for yourself. If there is one commandment from objectivism or from Ayn Rand, it's think. And I think that pretty much covers pretty much any point I would ever want to make. I'm not here to. I'm just here to hopefully inspire some change in people's lives. Oftentimes, even for me, it started with politics, but especially with Ayn Rand, it goes to much more. So I should say, in just 16 days, Resident Evil 9 Requiem is coming out, and that's going to be one of the most magnificent days ever, because you probably won't see me for like 2 days when that game comes out. But,
we just learned something about Daniel's values there.
Yes. So yeah, life is about much more than politics, of course, but those are important, and we should also care about those. That's why we're here every day, and we are going to be here every day, also tomorrow, with another episode of the Daily Objective and both the reality show. We should have both tomorrow, so make sure to join for that. Thank you, James, for joining me for today's longer episode. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us for a longer episode, and bye-bye.
Be safe.